ADHD Rewired, episode 479. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Jesse J. Anderson. Jesse is a writer, speaker, developer, and content creator who was diagnosed with ADHD at 36. He is the co-founder of Polar Habits, a guilt-free habit app, and he writes a weekly newsletter called Extra Focus. He is the author, or the soon-to-be author, he is still writing this book, of Refocus, Thriving with Adult ADHD. He also has 2 podcasts and some other stuff that I don't think he mentioned here in his bio. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan of ADHD Rewired since I was diagnosed back in 2017. So I've been listening for a long time. It's great to be here with you.
Well, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. After about 15 minutes of us just like diving into just talking, I'm like, oh, we should be recording because I think we're talking about some interesting stuff here. So,
right.
So let's get into it. So you were diagnosed, as you said, in 2016. So you're, I'm not going to math, but you're 40 something, right? And you like to write, you use humor. I was actually just listening to your podcast that you do with, why do I keep forgetting her name? Marie, what's her last name? Yes, Ning. I had her on the podcast.
Yes.
So you guys co-host this, and she has the platform, the To-Do platform. Of course, I'm just forgetting all the things right now, so help me.
Llama Life?
Yep, that's the one.
That's the one.
She has Llama Life. And so in the episode that came out today, we're recording this on February 21st. She talked about a little mistake that went out in an update. Could you just talk about it? Because it's funnier than hell.
Yeah, so it does the app Llama Life, which is an app for like kind of helping you with using timers to help you get stuff done. And they had a new app update that had like these templates that would sort of like help you come up with like the list of to-dos that you're going to do. And one of them was, I forget exactly what the template was for, but it had a message in it. Like one of the to-dos was check your refrigerator and your pantry. And so they set it out and sent it out. And then somebody quickly noticed that they were missing the letter R in the word pantry. So the task said, check your refrigerator and your panty. And then, as you might expect, social media kind of had a heyday with it. Lots of fun jokes in replying to that. And yeah, it was a good time. And we had a good laugh kind of recounting her experience kind of dealing with that typo and just really leaning into it, which is fun. I think a lot of people
that's what I loved, is the leaning into the mistake. And I love that you shared that when someone DM'd you guys and said that, there's like circled that. And her reply was, yeah, it's a good idea to check that. Like, she totally missed what they were actually referring to until like hours later. And I love that she shared that. And like that to me, like, okay, that's real and it's funnier than hell.
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of you referred to like, I think humor is so important, just especially in understanding kind of your ADHD, because it's kind of one of those things like if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. And maybe there's a little too much crying. So leaning into the laugh, I think is a great way to approach it. And that's really a lot of what I do with kind of my advocacy for ADHD is just really leaning into like what the funny aspects of life are, because like it would be so easy, I think, find out about that typo and just be like mortified and like delete it and hide it and try to make sure no one knew about it. But by leaning into it, it made it like kind of that's funny. Like telling people to check their panty it's funny.
I think that you're going to have to suggest a rebrand of their logo. I think it needs to be a llama wearing panties.
Oh man, I'll mention that to her on our next episode.
So now you are the co-founder of an app called Polar Habits. Talk about that.
Yeah, so Polar Habits. So the idea was started by my business partner, my co-founder, Murat, and he initiated it. He had kind of this idea where basically he was doing habits and he was trying to do stuff. I think it was initially he was like trying to do a course, and so there was like a self-paced course, and he was trying to consistently do like the lessons every day or every week or whatever it was. And he found that like most habit apps were all about like the streak. It was like, you got to have your streak, build up your streak. Like that's how
I hate the streaks.
Oh, they're the worst. Yeah. Streaks suck. They're terrible. But like almost every habit app out there is all about like celebrating like, oh, you did 13 days in a row and stuff like that. And so he had this idea basically, and he kind of built it in just like Google Sheets, just sort of like spreadsheets of like, what if when you missed a day, it didn't start you back at zero, but it sort of like affected this like kind of, he had a different name at the time, but basically like a momentum graph, because I did this consistently for 20 days. I shouldn't have to start over just because like I had a weekend where I didn't do it.
20 days doesn't undo itself.
Right, exactly. But with most habit apps, it does. And so what he did, he kind of built this formula. It's a pretty simple formula. I think we have it listed somewhere on our page, but it basically builds like this chart that allows it to kind of dip a little bit. And then like, if you miss it for like more and more and more and more days, eventually it will kind of drop down quicker. It's kind of like exponential that way. So he had done that kind of early on and then started building the app. And I saw it and immediately was like, I love this. Like, I want to be part of this. And so I reached out pretty early on, and then we decided to partner up on it. And so we've been working on it. We had a big launch in the beginning of January, like for the new year. And it's been going really great. But one of the things I love with the way we kind of have this graph that like charts your progress, like when you miss a day, when you see it in the graph, it's almost like, oh yeah, that's when I did this thing. It's almost like this historical like reminder. I don't know. There's something that it's a subtle change, but it makes a huge difference. And I found that it
doesn't shine the light on, hey, you sucked that day.
Right.
It's like, oh, yeah, that thing happened. Oh, but look how well you're doing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I find it to be like really encouraging. It's like, it's a small change that I think really pays dividends and really makes a big difference. And we've been getting a lot of really positive feedback from our users, people that try it out and really love kind of that new approach. So that's been really fun, because habits have always been kind of a hard thing for me to tackle. And right around the same time that I was working on the app, I read Tiny Habits, which was really good. And I've read Atomic Habits before as well. And so it's one of those things where I think habits are so funny because they sound like this magic solution, like, oh, just make it a habit and that's going to solve it. And it's like, I think at some point I tweeted like, habits are the big lie for curing your ADHD or something like that. Because it always feels like this magic solution. And then it's like, that's not how they work. Like you still have to make the choice, I feel like, for that habit to continue. It doesn't just like lock in one day and then works forever.
Well, it's funny, one of the things I talk about in my coaching groups is this idea that we have this tendency to like do life on autopilot, and we have the autopilot button, but it's not actually connected to anything. So we're like, yeah, I'm fine. I've been doing this for a while. Like I'm fine, and then months later you're like, wait, I used to work out. What happened? Right.
Yeah, I feel like those little revelations happen a lot where like, oh, I was doing this thing every day forever. And like, I forgot to one day. And then I never remembered to do it ever again. I've actually had that with jobs before. And so this is like, before I knew I had ADHD, there was this one job I had that I was pretty good at the job. Like I enjoyed the job. I was pretty good at it, but I had like a million little responsibilities. But what happened, that exact sort of thing happened. Like one week, I forgot to do one of the things. And my boss didn't just say like, hey, you forgot to do this. He like wrote it down in like a secret little notebook down somewhere. They're like, oh, Jesse stops doing this. Let's see when he starts doing it again. he did that for like a year, building up this list of like, they were all like the tiniest little things. And he never mentioned any of them to me. And eventually, out of the blue, we had one of those, the quote unquote, we need to talk meetings, which is never a good sign. I live in fear of those meetings. And sure enough, like show up to the meeting and he had this giant list of like all these tiny little things that looked really bad. Cause it's like, you haven't done this for 8 months and you haven't. And I was just like, at the time, so frustrated. I was like, if you had told me these, like I would have fixed, they were all so easy to fix. I just kind of like what you're saying, like I forgot to do it one day and then it's just like, it fell out of my brain and it never came back again. Now that I know about this kind of tendency and now that I know I have ADHD, whenever I have like a new manager or something like that, I specifically talk to them about this. We like schedule a check-in. So I'm like, I want to make sure like at the end of every week, I just want a quick little note that's like, hey, everything's good. I just want to make sure that something didn't slip through the cracks that I'm never going to notice. And so please just give me that like thumbs up that everything is good to go.
Yeah, the idea of that no news is good news is sometimes fake news.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. But going back to this idea of the habits being this like, in some ways it kind of is the holy grail of like managing ADHD and our executive functions, but like it takes a lot more work and effort than you might think or want. Right. Mm-hmm. But when you can do like, for me, my sort of like, oh, this actually is a habit is when I had a determined intention of, all right, I'm going to skip today. I'll do it tomorrow. And I find myself actually doing it on the day I plan on skipping it. I'm like, yes, it's a habit.
Right. That's your telltale sign. I'm like, it worked. I did it.
But because our environment, like we're so cute to our environment, one of the things that I've learned is that when I change environments for whatever reason, I need to bring that whatever the habit is into that environment very intentionally. Like for example, I have fallen out of exercise routines after traveling for a few days to a conference, and I had been exercising for like years. I go to a conference for 4 days, and then I forgot that I used to exercise. Like right. So like I make sure that I exercise when I like go to the conference. I make sure that I exercise on the first day back from the conference, right? Because it's like it's just so easy for that kind of stuff to slip.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me, we had this a while back, a time where the shower in our bathroom was like having issues. So we had to use the other one down the hall. So we had the other bathroom down the hall and we had to switch to start using that shower. And this seemed like this shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I like forgot to like brush my teeth. I wasn't using deodorant anymore. Like all of my morning routine, it was like habit stacks. I had this whole pattern that I'd get out of bed, I'd get in the shower, and then I would do all these things. And just because I was going through like a different shower, it didn't even occur to me. Like the thought of like, oh, should I brush? It was like, if I had thought of that, I would have been like, yes, brush your teeth. But it just like threw everything completely off. I was like lost. And I didn't even know what the problem was for a while. I was like, why am I forgetting? And then it like dawned on me. I'm like, the shower. Because before in the old bathroom, I'd step out of the shower and all the stuff was right there. And so I'd get out of the shower and I'd dry off and then I'd grab the deodorant or whatever. Like I had this like whole system, but since I was in the other bathroom, by the time I walked back, it was like that link had been broken and I had to like totally retrain myself. I literally like wrote down a list. What are the things I need to do in the morning? And I had that list on the mirror for a while because otherwise I hadn't thought about doing that stuff for like years. And just because we moved the shower now, it's like I had to relearn how to do my like basic morning hygiene routine.
Did you know they make special crayons that you can like use in the bathtub?
No, really.
So you can like totally like write your reminders right there. And as you're talking about this, I was thinking two things. So I have a inoperable shower in my master bathroom. Because I had to pull some tile back because the wall was soft. So we're like, all right, how bad is it? So we had to pull a couple tiles to see. And that was maybe a year and a half ago. So now I'm thinking, well, if I fix that, then I might also stop brushing my teeth. So I think it just makes more sense to just let the shower be.
Yeah, our brains are so tricky like that. I feel like my brain is so good at coming up with like really good, legitimate excuses to explain why I shouldn't do the thing that I should probably actually like reasons why I probably shouldn't do the taxes for another couple of weeks. And somehow I'm like, yeah, that seems logical. I don't know. I feel like it's weird when I talk about my brain because I think with ADHD, I feel like I have like two brains, like one that's me, and then one is like this device that like lets me do all the stuff. And so I have to like convince this other version, this other part of my brain. So I kind of refer to that as my brain. I'm like, I'm me and I have the intentions, and then my brain actually does the actions. So that's why there's always kind of like this disconnect where I'm like, I have really good intentions about doing these things and stuff I want to get done. And my brain is just like, nah, we're not going to do that today.
Not today. Not today.
Yeah.
What we are going to do today, though, we're going to do it right now. We're going to take a quick break. And we will be right back. And we are going to keep talking about the work that you are doing, your writing, your blog, all these other things. And I don't know, maybe some other weird habit stuff too. So we will be right back. Support for this show comes from ADHD reWired's award-winning coaching and accountability groups. Learn more at coachingrewired.com. We get a lot of questions. For example, during our monthly live Q&As, people ask us a lot about next steps for ADHD management. Maybe you're utilizing ADHD medication, or you've read books or listened to podcasts like this one to get tips and tricks on how to declutter or change careers or actually follow through with your plans. Or maybe you're already working with a mental health professional like a social worker or psychiatrist, but you still feel like something's missing. That's where coaching comes in. For so many people, it's been that game-changing ingredient where you can bring your own ingredients, your own tools and strategies, and build on and improve those strategies in ways that actually work for your unique ADHD brain. Of course, we'll share resources of our own to help you go from time blind to time wise, help you better manage your calendar and not just plan for the short term, but for the long term as well. Because here at ADHD reWired, we encourage our members to bring their lives to coaching, so that whether it's myself or one of our amazing coaches or our peer mentors, we can help you create actionable steps so you can live a more wholehearted and intentional life. Now, our spring season is already underway, which means that registration for our summer sessions is starting soon. Go to coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our interest list and start your pre-registration process today so you can join us for our registration kickoff event on Thursday, May 4th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Registration is by invitation only, so to get a head start on your pre-registration process, go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. We can't wait to meet you. Support for this podcast comes from you, our listeners. If you've been able to add new tools to your ADHD toolbox from tuning into this show, then consider subscribing if you haven't already. This way you don't miss out on stories from even more ADHD brains who I get to talk to every week. Like episode 460, where I was joined by Brittany Berger to talk about hustle culture and toxic productivity. If you want more ADHD related content to reach your headphones, then consider subscribing to other podcasts on the ADHD reWired podcast network, including ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan, Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb, and ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens. And up another show joining us soon. I've already heard the drafts of the first couple episodes. It's pretty exciting. Then every second Tuesday of the month, you can join me and the rest of the ADHD reWired podcast family and ADHD reWired coaches live on Zoom to get some answers to your ADHD related questions. It's always a lot of fun, and we love being able to connect with everyone in real time. That's ADHDrewired.com to find everything ADHD reWired, including our podcast archives, show notes, co-working community, and other shows, upcoming events, and of course, our coaching groups. The website again is ADHDrewired.com. The only thing you might not find there is your keys. You should check your winter coat. It might be in there. And we are back. All right. So we were just talking about habits, and during the break, Jesse and I were talking a little bit about just like podcasting and habits and perfectionism. And Jesse mentioned that it's like, oh, I'm getting close to episode 500. And because we are planning on talking about some perfectionism here, I had shared with him when he said that, like, oh God, like my heart actually skipped a beat. Because I in my head, I'm like, oh, I have to do something epic for episode 500, which makes me want to just like skip it and go back to 501.
Yeah, I definitely can relate with that. I feel like there's always like those things that if you're supposed to celebrate it, then it's like, oh, I just want to avoid it completely. The expectation just gets too big, especially in my head. I just like build it up, build it up. So yeah. So what exciting thing are you going to do?
I, I have no idea. Like I literally have no like, and I've done special ones for like episode I think 100 and 200. I had like a whole like, bunch of people on the podcast for one episode, and like all those things are fun. And it's I don't know. I don't know.
You know what you should do? You should just do you should do another car drive and just record yourself in the car for an hour. Whatever episode that was. That was back
47
in like the 50s.
Yep,
47.
Yep, episode 47. ADHD at 55 miles an hour. It's still the most.
Yeah, exactly.
I still get emails because of that episode. It's wild. Okay, so let's this isn't about me, it's about you. Let's talk about your writing and some perfectionism. Because I know when we first talked, you were talking about some of the perfectionism too with your writing and some overcommitting. And then you said to me, Eric, I don't know how to be coached.
Yeah. We were talking about coaching a little bit, and I feel like I know coaches, like I know people that are ADHD coaches, and I feel like coaching, I see the benefit, and I almost wish I could have that. But my fear is like, I feel like I don't know how to be coached. Like I've been in like a therapy session before where I'll be in there and I have this like, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like I'm talking with the therapist and then they like hop on a train and they're like, all right, get on the train with me. And here we go. I don't actually feel like we're going in a direction that I care about, but I also don't know that enough to like say anything about it. And I don't know if this makes any sense, but I feel like stuck in this conversation that doesn't feel like it's actually coaching. I just feel like I don't know. I like there's this expectation that maybe it's just my own like made up expectation of what the session should be like. And then it's not that. And I feel like it's my fault. It feels like I've shown up, it's like how I felt growing up a lot. Like I'm in a situation, everyone else knows what they should do in this situation, but I don't know what I should do. And so I'm just like panicking and I'm like, and I don't want to say anything because am I wasting their time? Is this a way, like, how can I get out of this?
Oh,
I'm just
so
like
you're
trying
a
to
people
escape.
pleaser too.
It's so funny. Like I've seen people lately talking about like the people pleasing, and I don't think of myself like that, but it probably is true because like I just said, like I'm worried about.
What if I told the therapist I don't understand where we're going while we're here? Like how would what would they think about me?
Yeah. I think there's that people pleaser that is kind of hidden because I think I rebel a lot. I think that's why I don't feel like people pleaser. Like that's when I hear people pleaser, I don't relate. So I'm like, I don't know. I rebel. I just say if people are doing one thing, I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I ain't going to do that. And I'm okay that upsets people. And so that part of me is like not people pleasing. But then again, like you're saying, clearly my example of the therapist is I'm like, well, I don't want to make them upset that I don't get what we're talking about here.
So in the when you apply to be on the podcast, and we do the pre-interview, one of the questions I asked on the pre-interview is, why do you want to be a guest on the podcast? And you wrote, I would love to talk about the importance of advocacy. What about self-advocacy? So
what do you mean?
So self-advocacy is the communication piece of, so it's the combination of self-awareness, knowing yourself and what you want and need, self-determination, having goals, desires, intentions, and then being able to communicate those to where you need to.
Right.
So as I'm sort of piecing this together, and I was just glanced out at my paper here, importance of advocacy. But sitting on the therapist couch and has these thoughts about not sure why we're on this train, and I don't think I even want to be on this train, but not sure I could say that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know what I think about that. So I don't feel like I normally have difficulty standing up for myself. Like people that know me, like I'm pretty vocal about my opinions. I don't hold back, which, sometimes is to my detriment. Like I'm pretty vocal about things I care about, but there is something about that context, I suppose, that it feels like it's not my place or something to self-advocate for whatever reason. I'm not sure what that is.
Is it when there's an element of some kind of uncertainty?
That could be because I think I come to my, like, I have strong opinions and I usually come to them pretty quick. Like if there's something new that's shown up, like maybe someone like at work, like proposes a new idea, I come to my opinion pretty quickly. I trust my intuition a lot. Like I think my intuition's really good and I lean into it and I usually have a pretty quick opinion on things. And I feel like maybe like with therapy, I'm a little bit more like, I don't know this world. And so I don't know what my opinion is. And then I feel kind of trapped a little bit. Yeah.
As both a trained therapist and as a frequent consumer of therapy services, one of the things I have found to be most helpful is the inner dialogue that's telling you that you're doing it wrong. Say it out loud. Like if you're working with a decent therapist, they're like that gives them so much to work with. Like the last therapist that I was working with, one of the things I would say probably at every session was, all right, so the thing I don't really want to tell you this week is like,
right.
because
Yeah.
I mean, there is this universal phenomenon that we go to therapists and there are things that we don't tell our therapists. If we take a step back from that, like that is silly.
Right. Yeah. I think it's almost rooted in like so much with having ADHD, growing up with ADHD is like you build up this giant ball of shame. There's just like so much that you're just like ashamed of and like which kills like your self-esteem and stuff like that. And so I think for most of my childhood, I was just like building up this list of things where I'm like, well, I can't tell anyone any of this. Like there's like all these like secrets you're building up. And they don't really feel like secrets. It's just like, well, this is like evidence of me being an idiot or me being a failure or me being whatever. And so I think you end up with this list of shame that you built up from childhood, just from having ADHD and not fitting in and not knowing, especially, I mean, it's either way, but especially not being diagnosed, because then you have like nothing to look like. Why? What is wrong with me? Why am I wrong? Why am I different? Like, why don't I get these things that other people seem to get? And so I think that probably carries through when I'm in therapy. It probably like feels that again. I'm like that feeling of like, I don't know why I don't know what's going on here. Like, I don't want to share. Like that's in the vault over here and I don't let people into the vault.
So it's a little, so you do share a lot of you. And I think it's okay to also keep some things in the vault. I mean, there's even myself who is, I'm very open and, I say that vulnerability is my love language. Like there's still stuff that like I don't share because it's either I'm still processing stuff or it doesn't seem relevant to kind of whatever the context of the conversation is. Right.
Right.
Like, I don't need to share all of my shit. Like I share enough of it.
Right.
So what about you? So you started getting into writing about ADHD. So you were diagnosed in 2016. When did you start writing about ADHD?
So not for a few years. And actually it was 2017. I think I wrote down, I keep mixing that up because I was 36, but it was 2017.
Oh, that's confusing.
Yeah, it throws me off because normally I know my age because my birthday is on a 10 year. So it's like 2023. That means on my birthday, I turn 43. Like I have that, but I was diagnosed before my birthday.
I was born on a 10 year and I get confused because it's in December.
Oh yeah, that's brutal.
Like at the very end of December.
Yeah, I'm in May, so it's like I have the better half of the year. I got the numbers lined up.
I love it. All those kinds of tricks. You're like, okay, I understand it in theory, but for the life of me, I cannot apply it.
Right. That's like remembering my kids' age. Like right now, it's 6, 9, and 12, which is perfect. It's this nice. I can do it. But as soon we have a birthday coming up in a month and I'm going to be totally lost again. It's going to be all over. But right now it's like this sweet spot where I can easily just 6, 9, 12 done. Anyway, yeah. So I was diagnosed in 2017, which just like blew my mind. Had no idea. Just learning about like my issues with time because I've been late to everything forever. Like the most important thing in the world, and I'm still late to it. Like job interviews and all of that, like late to everything and never had a reason why. So that was like such a huge thing to figure out and learning about, rejection sensitivity and all of that. Like, oh, that's the thing behind a lot of the like anger issues I had, especially growing up. And so there's like all these things I learned about ADHD that were just like blew my mind at the time. But I didn't write about it or anything back then. And then for some reason, I still don't remember why, but a couple of years ago, someone had mentioned like this little like writing challenge that was called Ship 30 for 30. And the idea was you would write like I don't know, like a 500 word, they called it atomic essay. So it's just like a short little blurb that you would write every day for 30 days. And for some reason, I signed up for it and I wrote down topics I was going to write about. So I'm a designer and developer. And so some of the topics I wrote down had to do with design. And then I had a few things. I was like, well, it'd be cool to write about Dr. William Dodson has this thing called the interspace nervous system. And I find that really fascinating. So that would be a cool topic for one of my essays to write about. And the rejection sensitive dysphoria. I'd like to mention that and talk about that as well. And so I started the challenge and I wrote the first two things were on ADHD. And immediately I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Like I got really good feedback immediately. Like it was connecting with people that didn't know anything about ADHD. And they're like, wait, what is this? And so I was like having that like kind of really cool moment of getting to be part of someone else's story. I'm like, this changed my life and I get to be part of like that story for helping you figure this out. This is amazing.
I love that.
And that just like snowballed pretty quickly. So I threw out all my topics about like design and stuff like that. And I just wrote about ADHD for most of the stuff for that first session. And then I started my newsletter at the same time. So this was February 2 years ago. I started the Extra Focus newsletter. And in that, I was just sort of like talking through my own, like what I was working through and figuring out and all that about ADHD and like researching and all of that stuff. And then I kind of, again, I don't know why I did the challenge because I wasn't even like a writer. I didn't call myself a writer, but for some reason I did it. And then I just sort of like fell in love with writing. Like, wow, I really enjoy doing this. And then now I'm writing a book. The newsletter is going and the newsletter is growing because I'm doing like other posts on it as well. And then kind of the social media thing blew up. So I have like a big following on Twitter and Instagram where I just sort of tweet. I don't know. It's like little quips and jokes about ADHD. And yeah, so apparently I'm a writer now. And I don't really know why it started.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You fell into it. That's awesome. I love when we fall into stuff that we end up loving. It's
yes.
It's
the best.
That is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So the book that you are writing is called Refocus, Thriving with Adult ADHD. And you're self-publishing as of now anyway.
Yes. Currently that is the plan.
That's the current plan. So how are you doing this?
Like, what do you mean? In which way are you asking?
I'm always just like, just always floored by people with ADHD who can write books. I'm just like, wow, like the fantasized version of myself. Like I've written so many books and I'm good at it and it's easy. But like I am nowhere near that fantasized version of myself. This is why I podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing with writing a book is like I'm lucky I fell in love with it because it's so hard. It is so freaking hard. I know I've gotten to know Jessica McCabe from How to ADHD, and she's writing a book, and we've messaged a few times, just like commiserating, like this is the worst decision ever. What are we doing? This is such a mistake.
I know. I gotta tell Jessica too that like she needs to finish this book because I miss my friend because we have not been talking that much since she's been writing her book.
All she's doing is trying to write the book. Yeah, it's like all consuming. So it is so much work. I basically I'd been doing the atomic essays. So just like short little like 500 word things about it. And for some reason I was like, oh, if I did a few more of those as like a book, like I could have like a shorter book and it'd be fine. And oh man, it's so much more to it because you have to make sure that everything connects. It's a nonfiction book, but there still has to be like a narrative. You can't just like have a topic and then jump to a completely different topic without there being any sort of like flow. And so you have to think about like how to structure things. And it's way more work than I thought it was going to be when I started doing it. Through that process, I've been figuring out like the things that work well for me. Like one thing I've enjoyed doing is sometimes I will, like if I want to write a new chapter in the book, instead I'll just write a Twitter thread. So I'll write it in that context because that feels really familiar. I've been using Twitter for so long. It's like writing in tweets. And so I use Typefoley, which like lets you write like long threads like that. But I write it broken up like it's tweets. And then that way I usually get like half the book chapter. I do have shorter chapters. So I get like half the book chapter just by writing that thread. And then I post that. And then I get like a lot of people reply to that and sort of comment on it. And then I'm getting like this great free kind of feedback. I'm like, oh, several people are really connecting with this part of it. So maybe I could expand on that. Or like, oh, no one likes this, or someone points out a flaw. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't say that. And so I'm just like kind of learning by, like, I'm sort of building in public, writing it in public by doing these tweet threads that people can engage with. And then I'm not staring at a blank page, because like the worst part in writing is when you have a blank page and you're just like, what do I even say? And so since this tweet thread thing works for me, like that's become sort of like a great initiator for like, I got a new chapter, write a thread, learn from feedback, and then now I have like a great starting point that I can just sort of expand in the book.
Now, you've said though too that you've had some issues with perfectionism and how that kind of can stifle some of your motivation.
Yeah. So like right now it's talking about the tweet thread stuff and like it's all glorious, but also I'll be reading the book and I'm like, well, this is all trash. I just need to like take a break for, 6 months and walk away because I'm like terrified to look at it or anything like that.
And that's what you actually did. You were writing this and you literally stopped for 6 months.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
and I've
that
done.
part's understandable. The part that I think is amazing is that you came back to it.
I think partly I was just too embarrassed to abandon it completely. I was like, I put a lot of work into it and a lot of people know about it. I can't just like not do it. And so I abandoned it for a long time. And then I basically kept doing, because I did this a really long one, like 6 months, but I also took another like 3-month break here. And then I took another like 3 or 4 month break there. And every time I kind of had to trick myself into coming back, because it was like I knew that my interest had like waned, like I'd lost like whatever was driving me. And so I'd have to do something. So like one thing I did, I just like in my newsletter, I just like announced like, hey, do you want to be a beta reader for my book? Sign up here and the beta is going to start in 2 weeks. And I sent that email and I was like, well, crap, now I got 2 weeks because like, I don't want anyone to see the book in its current state. So that just like, there was like a forcing function of like, now I got to go through there and clean this up and make it better. And so I've done that sort of a thing a few different times to try and like jazz up my interest to get me back into kind of that flow of getting stuff done again.
Jesse, that's my secret sauce right there. That's how I've done most of the things of significance with my business is I announce it and then I'm like, oh shit, I got to do this now.
Right. Yeah.
And it just works. And it's like, it feels like it helps, like it gets you up to that, like the healthy level of stress. Right.
Yeah.
Like where it's like, oh shit, like, because it's kind of gamified because you set it up yourself, it's like, oh, I got to do this now. Okay. I think that's great. Has there been anything that you have done since this is kind of a pattern of you putting it down, coming back to make it easier for you to come back?
Well, I think easier to come back. Like, do you have an example? Like, what do you mean?
Sure. So like one of the things that we talk about in our coaching groups is the idea of leaving yourself a trail of crumbs to like make it easier to come back. So like, if it's like a project, you write down what you just did. And if you were to continue working, what you'd be doing next.
No, so I haven't done that. That's a really great idea and probably something, if I do book 2, which I'm hoping I'm going to do another book, that's probably something I should do is sort of, I think so much of like managing ADHD is just like learning my patterns and then trying to build systems around catching those patterns.
All right. I want all the listeners to just in case you tuned out for a second, because what Jesse just said is literally like in a sentence, ADHD management. Can you say it again?
No, it just flew out of my head. Oh, just like learning my patterns and then like adapting strategies to kind of match those patterns. I think that's what I said.
I'm going to the transcripts. Okay.
Perfect.
So you said, I think so much of managing ADHD is just like learning my patterns and then trying to build systems around catching those patterns. It was something like that. That's what I think you said.
So yeah, I think that is a really great idea. And like now that I know that this is probably going to be for me, like with books, like writing a book, I'm probably going to take steps away, having sort of maybe like a running list of like, what are my next sort of like plans here or that sort of thing is probably a really good idea, because that definitely becomes kind of an intimidating factor. Like once I've stepped away for a few weeks, there's no easy entry point. I'm like, how do I even come back? And so that's where I've done like that forcing, it's kind of like, Hallowell's Now or Not Now. It's like, there's not the urgency with the book. So if I make it now by announcing it, or another thing I did, I hired an editor to do a manuscript review. And so he gave me a deadline. And then that was like another like, well, crap, that was after I had done beta reading. So I had all this feedback and I just wasn't doing anything with it. But then I paid somebody money to do this manuscript review. So then that forced me to like, okay, I got to go through all this feedback now and apply it because I got 5 days. And
I love it.
Yeah, I do. I've been doing that. And I think doing something like you're suggesting would really help in the future of having an easy on-ramp, because that becomes so intimidating, especially when it's been months, where it's like, I don't even know where to start. I know that I don't want anyone to see it in its current state. I'm like embarrassed of it. And I'm terrified because, like we've kind of said before the interview, I'm terrified because a book feels so permanent, where a lot of the work, like the newsletter, I mean, there's an archive of the newsletter and like you could find my old tweets and stuff, but they feel much more like of the moment. So it's like it happens and then it goes away, and then no one's looking for like typos or mistakes for something I wrote like a week ago or months ago in one of the like tweets or the newsletter or whatever. But with a book, 4 years could go by and someone gets a copy of it and they're like, hey, this thing you said is wrong and I can't fix it, because like a book goes out and it's like once it's printed, like it's permanent. And so that's definitely where that perfectionism comes in, where I'm just like terrified of like, I'm going to do this thing. And like the second I release it, it's too late. Like I can do updates for like Kindle version, stuff like that. But that printed version is like done. And people are going to run into it later. Like books hang around. Hopefully people are reading my book in years, but I'm terrified of that too at the same time. So it's really getting over that hump has been difficult with something as big as a book. And I'm sure like Jessica writing her book, I'm sure she's having that same thing too. Like this is so permanent. I don't know. I don't want to say that's what Jessica's going through, but that's definitely what I'm going through. I'm terrified of the permanency of it all.
Do they have like ink that like will just fade in 5 years?
That's the way to do it. Yeah.
And it replaces it with like a QR code that says, get the updated version for this.
Right. It's like the Banksy version where you had the art that like shredded itself as soon as somebody bought it. That's why I need the book that just shreds itself after a year.
Let's do this. Let's take one more quick break. You had mentioned a little earlier that kind of pre-diagnosis, you never got anywhere on time. And I want to know how you're doing with that now. So we will be right back. Are you tired of your cluttered desk hindering your productivity and focus? Have you tried to tidy up only to find yourself drowning in paperwork and chaos just a day later? Introducing the revolutionary Tiltmaster 3000, an amazing product brought to you by my imagination. Just imagine if the Tiltmaster 3000 was here to save the day and rewire your workspace for success. The Tiltmaster 3000 is not just a desk, it's a life-changing productivity and decluttering companion that I really need. With its state-of-the-art design and cutting-edge technology, this dream of a desk has a unique feature that makes it unlike any other desk out there. It tilts to a 45-degree angle at a time set by you. That's right, with the Tiltmaster 3000, messy desks could be a thing of the past. Imagine every day at a time set by you, this revolutionary desk would automatically tilt to a 45-degree angle, forcing you to clear off your workspace and keep your environment tidy and clutter-free. While the Tiltmaster 3000 may not be real, the ADHD reWired podcast is. And it's your go-to source for tips, strategies, and support to help you thrive with ADHD. Visit our website, ADHDrewired.com, and subscribe to the podcast for the latest insights and advice. We'd love it if you could leave us a review and share your thoughts and experiences with the ADHD reWired community. Your reviews help us reach many more people that can make a positive impact on their lives. Though the Tiltmaster 3000 is just a playful concept, the ADHD reWired podcast is your real-life companion for thriving with ADHD. Subscribe, leave a review, and join us in creating a more organized and focused life. Your future self will thank you. This message was brought to you by the ADHD reWired podcast, your go-to source for tips, strategies, and support to help you thrive with ADHD. And if you act now, we'll include a free safety net that you attach to your desk, just in case you forgot to clear it off before you go home for the day.
Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our Patreon community. If you love our work, consider becoming a patron at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. When you become a patron at the $5 a month level or more, you can get uninterrupted episodes with the ads at the end of the show, so you don't miss any announcements from us. Then patrons at $25 a month can join me for our monthly coaching call every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, which means our next coaching call is next week. But I understand that time might not work for everyone. So if you don't want to miss out on those tips and tricks and conversations that we have during those small group coaching calls, patrons at $10 a month can get the audio recording of those calls in a private podcast feed. I am so grateful to all of our patrons who support us. Your support helps us to continue to share stories from other ADHD guests from all walks of life. And I hope we've been able to have a positive impact on your ADHD journey. If we have, and you are able to, consider becoming a patron by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Again, perks start at just $5 a month, and any amount is greatly appreciated. That link again is ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Patreon is Patreon. And thank you so much. All right, we are back with ADHD Jesse. I think that's your Twitter handle, right?
Yep.
All right, so you mentioned a while ago that for most of eternity, you were late for everything. How are you dealing with that now?
I would say it's still a struggle,
Okay.
but it definitely isn't fixed. I think being aware of it, kind of what I said before, just like learning my patterns has really helped a lot. Plus, I'm married now and my wife does not have that problem. She's neurotypical. And so she is very helpful. Like, oh, I have an appointment I have to drive to. She's really helpful at like getting me out the door for that sort of thing. Because otherwise I probably would still just be like, I have the problem, and I've always had this where I'm like, oh, okay, so I got to get to the place and like say I have to be there at 5:30. It takes half an hour to get there. Okay, so I got to leave at 5. And so I'll set the alarm. It's 4:50. So I should leave my desk and then get ready to go out, get in the car. Meanwhile, I'm forgetting about like, oh, I have to park when I get there and I have to like sign in. And who knows what traffic will be like. It's 5 o'clock, so there's going to be more traffic. Like, I don't think about any of that. It's just like
transitions actually take time.
Yes. Yeah. The thing that usually catches me is I'll get up and I'll start to like go to the door, but then I'm like, well, I don't want to leave yet. Like, it's not time to leave yet. It's like almost time to leave. And I know some people with ADHD are like always early to things. Me, I don't ever want to be early to anything because that just feels like I'm going to be like, I don't know, are people going to ask me questions? Do I have to do small talk? I hate small talk. I'm like, I want to be exactly on time or nothing. Like I just do not want to be early. Like it almost feels like a compulsion of like, I'll see something and be like, oh, I've got to organize this real quick. Or, oh, I got to do this thing real quick. I got to put this up. And it's something I've been ignoring for months, but suddenly now it feels like I have to do this in this moment. This mail needs to be sorted right now. And inevitably like that, I think I have 5 minutes. It takes 15 minutes and then I leave late and then I'm late to the thing. Since finding out more about ADHD, I've been trying to kind of like self-analyze this. And I feel like one thing that might be happening is I know the urgency motivates me. And so I feel like, again, that separation of the brain, I'm like, ooh, I've got that urgency thing. This lets me make the brain do stuff. So maybe right now, because if I get home after this, appointment, I'm not going to want to sort the mail. There's no urgency for anything anymore. And so I'm not going to be able to do that chore that I've been avoiding forever.
You open to an idea?
Yeah.
So what if you said the only time that you can go through your mail was right before an appointment? So you actually bring your mail with you and you go through it in the car, in the parking lot of the place that you are going to.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is an interesting approach because then it wouldn't be early, but I would just be there with the thing that I could do. That is something I could definitely try because I feel like because there's like a panic of losing that urgency. And I think that's part of why I don't want to be early too. Cause I'm like, I'm going to get there and, have all this like urgency power that I can't use for getting something done. So maybe I do kind of a reverse of that with like, I'll have like a podcast that I really love And so I'll say the only time I can listen to this is if I'm doing dishes or something like that. So it's kind of like a reverse version of that, where I don't allow myself to do the thing unless I'm doing something that I know I won't do. Otherwise, I'll ignore the dishes for, years, probably. I don't know. For like, I'll just completely ignore the dishes. But I wanted to hear this podcast. So then it's like, oh, I'm not doing the dishes. I'm listening to the podcast, and the dishes is just kind of something I have to do in the background while I'm doing the thing that I want to do. Yeah, I like that.
I think there's so many tasks like that like those kind of 10 to 15 minute type tasks that we can sort of squeeze in and engineer that urgency. Like you were
Yeah.
mentioning with doing dishes. Like one of the things that has helped me with the habit of making my lunch the night before instead of waiting for the morning is I will actually, instead of starting dinner prep, I do my lunch prep first. Cause like I know that I'm hungry and my son's
Oh,
gonna want to eat too, and so like
yeah, yeah.
I gotta hurry my shit up and get my lunch made so I can start making dinner.
Right,
And
right.
the other benefit of that is because I would wait till like after either when he was going to take a bath or shower, or after he goes to bed, and by that time it was like 50-50 if I had enough EF left to actually make the
Right.
lunch.
Yeah, that's pretty clever. I like that a lot. I feel like so much of like learning my patterns is like, well, okay, so I have to trick myself to do the thing by kind of forcing it into a place that it's kind of like in the way of the thing I need to get to. So then I'll just like be more likely to kind of like power through it like that. That's pretty good.
What I find so interesting about you, Jesse, is that you said that you're like not sure you would know how to be coached. You have one of the most important ingredients of a good coachee, and that's curiosity. Like you're
Oh
clearly
man.
very curious about your patterns, and that's gold. Like if you have
Hmm.
a non-judgmental curiosity towards how things are going, like you're gonna figure it all out. Like it just takes time.
Interesting. Yeah, I would definitely say curiosity is one of my strengths for sure. I'm infinitely curious, which like we haven't talked about my job much, but like as a designer and a developer, that's what really allows me to kind of thrive there is I'm always curious. Like I'm always wanting to learn more about things, and which is fun to, get diagnosed with ADHD because holy cow, is there a lot to learn there. So just like constantly, it's been years and I'm still like learning new stuff about it all the time. Yeah, so that's really interesting to hear that could be beneficial for coaching.
'Cause it's that open-mindedness, it's so
Mm.
often we might brainstorm ideas for stuff, and I think that skips and we recommend our coaching group members actually read the book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 'cause
Mm.
in this book, they talk about question storming. So there's brainstorming, so there's question storming, and the power of questions and question storming, 'cause it's like, oh my sometimes we realize that we're not actually solving for the right problem, and if we
Oh
focus
yeah.
first on the questions, that's where we really get to like, "Oh, I can enter this at 10 different angles. Okay. Like, now I can actually see what I'm actually trying to solve."
Right, right. Nice. Hmm.
Alright, so what haven't I asked you about that you wanna tell people about? I think we mentioned your podcast, ADHD Nerds and the Weekly Build. You recently put ADHD Nerds on pause or
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit before the show, but it has been doing really well and it's been super fun. And I have the problem of I say yes to anything that sounds interesting. I think I'm pretty good at saying no to things that don't sound interesting, but if it sounds fun, like interesting, I'm like all in, like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I sometimes say it's like I feel like I'm juggling chainsaws, and which is really fun and exciting to kind of watch. But then even chainsaw juggling eventually gets boring. Like you can't watch someone juggle like 3 chainsaws for like half an hour. Like eventually you're like, yeah, we get it. But if you keep adding more chainsaws, that kind of ups the excitement a little bit. So I feel like for me, if I feel like I'm getting bored a little bit, like I'm worried that like, oh, I'm going to drop the ball on these things, my default is like add a new thing and then kind of use that energy to kind of keep all the things going. Which probably is going to lead to burnout at some point. But yeah, because of that, I have really hard time saying no to things that are interesting and are exciting. But at some point, I noticed that I was like trying to schedule some upcoming guests for the show, and I was like, oh, I'm not excited about this. This feels like a chore. Like I have to schedule, and then like the editing is going to feel like work. I'm like, oh no, I lost like the fun here, even though the interviews were still super fun. And so it just sort of like jumped out at me. Like I really need to finish the book this year. Hopefully the first half of this year. And because I'm still doing a full-time job in addition to kind of all this ADHD stuff and having a family with 3 kids, like, time is finite. I only have so much time to put around. And I realized finally that like ADHD Nerds was taking a lot of it. And so I kind of put it on pause. I released an episode that basically said, this is the end of chapter 1. And I already, because I can't help it, I already have things I'm thinking about for chapter 2. But I basically kind of I'll say it on the podcast to make it for reals. Like, I'm not going to do chapter 2 until my book is done. And so once the book is done, then I'm going to kind of reevaluate again and probably want to do chapter 2. Because like I said, I have got all exciting things I want to try. I want to get back into it. But for now, that's sort of, I had to put that on pause so that I could give the book and some of my other stuff like more of my attention.
Jesse, where can people follow you? Instagram, Twitter, all those things, and find out about your book.
Yeah. So my username on Twitter and Instagram is just ADHD Jesse, and that's JESSE. And that's my website too, ADHDjesse.com. The main thing I tell people to go to, other than following me on social media, is my newsletter. So I have the weekly newsletter, Extra Focus, which is just at extrafocus.net. And then the book, there's not a lot on the book site right now, but you can sign up for the waiting list, which is refocusedbook.com. But just go to the newsletter. Everything's kind of the newsletter. That's the best place to go to follow the stuff that I'm doing. Yeah.
Jesse, this was a ton of fun. I felt like I could have gone maybe 2 hours having our conversation here with you. But when I look at the analytics, nobody listens after the hour mark. So I try. So
right.
I'm interested, but I want to make sure that everyone's hearing this content. So, Jesse,
awesome.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and I definitely come on back when you finish this book. I'd love to have you back on.
Oh, I would love that. That would be amazing. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. It was great to chat with you.
Awesome. Thanks.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all of the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.